Here we go, here we go. Here we go, here we go. Here we go, here we go, here we go, here we go, here we go. Here we go, here we go. Here we go, here we go. Here we go, here we go, here we go, here we go, here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go, here we go, here we go, here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go, here we go, here we go, here we go.
All right. Hello and welcome to all of our viewers out there. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Containers from the Couch. We've got an exciting episode for you today. We've got two guests as well as my co-host, Jeremy Cohen, here with me today. Our two guests are going to be from Snyk and Sysdig. How about we start with a quick around the table? Tell us your name, tell us what you do, and a little bit about the company you work for. Marco, how about we start with you?
Sure. Hi, my name is Marco Morales. I'm a Senior Partner Solutions Architect at Snyk. Snyk is a developer-first application security company. I'll show you a couple slides a little later, but know that we're here to describe all kinds of things around containers and Kubernetes. And at Snyk, I work with a number of partners such as AWS and Sysdig, and we do whatever we can to make the world better for our population that wants to use their tooling in their favorite environments by building better and better integrations all the time. And we'll show you some of that today.
Awesome. And in the spirit of how we do things on Containers from the Couch, you better believe we're going to have a demo today. Super excited to get to that. Next, let's jump to Eric.
Hey, thanks, I'm Eric Carter, and I'm on the product marketing team here at Sysdig. Been here for a little over 5 years, but it's not your run-of-the-mill product marketing, right? I actually do what I do around solutions with partners, right? And thus with Snyk, thus with AWS. And so the idea is, how do we best communicate some of the interlocking, solutions in the stack that we're doing together with different players across the industry. So it's exciting. Sysdig is really all about cloud and container security. Many folks may know us, and we'll get into this in a little bit, from the Falco project, which is now over in the CNCF. But runtime is really ultimately what people think about us for. How do I secure that when I'm putting stuff out into production?
Absolutely. I think Snyk and Sysdig both, big names in the containers and Kubernetes open source landscape, especially when thinking about things like observability, metrics, security. Okay, last but not least, my co-host, Jeremy. Jeremy, how are you doing today?
I'm pretty good, Cy. So thanks for having me. My name is Jeremy Cowan. I'm a Senior Manager of Developer Advocacy for Amazon EKS, and excited to have both Snyk and Sysdig on the show today. You've already settled a debate for me as to how to pronounce Snyk. I wasn't sure if it was Snyk or Snyk, but you've helped me there already. So today's topic is application security with Sysdig and Snyk. And when I think of application security, I often think of like following secure coding practices, fuzz testing, static code analysis, things like that. Can you tell the audience what application security means in the context of Kubernetes? And we'll start with Marco, if you want to
take it away, Marco.
Yeah, sure. So I'll start with one or two sentences about, Snyk will focus on the application security. So as your developers write, assemble, and deploy their software, their applications, that's the kind of security we're looking for. It's really complicated. There's a lot of layers. We know firewalls and other things are important, but we're looking squarely at the code that people create and build. For Kubernetes, we have a couple of shared perspectives, and also share it with Sysdig, is that when people run their code in a container on a Kubernetes cluster, you have to focus on like a number of things. One is the application itself. The other one is the container, its operating system, the packages, and the other one is the Kubernetes cluster itself. We have, a bunch of nice examples of how those can be exploited. I'll show you one in particular today. And those are things that we feel is really important. You're not going to be able to solve security with one tool or one screwdriver. I'd like to tell people, think of it as you're going outside and it's really cold. You need boots, you need pants, you need a shirt, you need a jacket, you need a hat. We're all bringing one piece of those wardrobe, and we hope you see some of that today.
Great. And Eric, do you have a different perspective, or slightly different perspective than?
Yeah, well, I think these days you hear a lot about, supply chain security and all these kind of things. Like, there's a lot to think about from the time you're developing those apps, getting them in the containers, through the pipeline, trying to get into production, and then even in production, right? And so that's a lot of where we'll talk about the solution today with Sysdig comes in. And what we're finding is that, of course, the world wants to use reusable components, things like containers that are open source that I'm getting from various repositories, and just grabbing it and using it, it's probably not the wisest idea, right? That's where we'll get into some of the way. How do you check what's really going on here from a security vulnerability standpoint? Recent survey or study that we did, I should say, we have a report, and I'll share the link in a second. And we were finding that, as people scanned the open source containers, like 87% of them had high or critical vulns in it. It's not really surprising. But now what do we do with that, right? Are we going to fix those? Are we going to allow them to run? And we're going to talk a little bit today about how can we best kind of walk down on that, because it's overwhelming sometimes, the numbers that come back at you. Like, I can't fix all of these. Where do I start?
Yeah. You're almost inundated with information, and it's hard to know where to start and what to prioritize.
Yeah.
You mentioned software supply chain security. It's getting a lot of attention these days, and I think you mentioned a couple of reasons for that. It's increasingly common for folks to use open source libraries and packages when building their applications, and oftentimes you don't know whether the library or package that you're using has a vulnerability, or it's been tampered with. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little about, like how the industry is dealing with this problem and what Snyk and Sysdig are doing specifically.
I'll start here. So Snyk has a very big opinion on open source libraries, and we know it's a big part of what people use, love, and reuse. In one of the recent studies that we've done, we've discovered or uncovered that between 70 and 90% of the payload in a modern software application is from open source. It's really convenient, and so that helps people save time. But it also opens you up to the potential for someone else has a software vulnerability that's usually not intended. So when we know that people are doing this, and we, by the way, have this very large open source vulnerability database, it's important for people to be able to say to themselves, I don't want to look up this information. I'd rather be told there are a lot of public assets out there, and we help provide this context, this information for users. So it is easier for them to say, if I have a certain library, version 1.2.3, does it have any known vulnerabilities? And we can provide those answers. I'll show you as part of like a drive-by, hey, by the way, here is some extra information. I'll show you a little later how some of this works. And the relief people have is they don't mind being told, we've already done all the work for you. There's plenty of options out there. Snyk is one of them, where we can tell you, you may want to reconsider using something beyond version 1.2.3 and something more modern. And I'll show you directly how that looks for things like, say, a Docker file and a couple of other examples.
Great. Eric, anything further to add?
Well, as you asked that question, I was thinking about, the container market has grown enough now that we do start to see that sort of malicious actors are trying to target that as well. And as what we see is, quietly, they're trying to infiltrate, and even put, the containers that look like they're the right thing for me to go grab and download. But and I think our threat research team looked into that, and so many things in some of the public repositories that are there as trickery, right? And if you just take it and run it, best of luck to you. And those are the kind of things you want to be careful of. And I was talking about it's good to monitor for things in runtime, but you also want to make sure no one's getting into your pipeline and injecting things and so on. So there's a lot of things to keep an eye on across the board, I would say.
Yeah, it's definitely a complex problem because not only do you have direct dependencies, but you also have indirect dependencies, like dependencies of dependencies. It's turtles all the way down. So definitely not an easy problem to solve. Marco, I know that you had a presentation prepared as part of today's session. Do you want to launch into that
Sure.
now and give us an overview of the solution?
Yeah, for the next couple minutes, I'll show you about 5-6 slides just to give you some extra context for what we're going to talk. But I did want to give a call out to the dependencies, transitive dependencies. I know they're like jokes and memes of like if you do an npm install, you tend to download the whole internet. And for those people who are in that loop, like you know what it means, and that is a real thing. Like a lot of stuff gets brought along. It's really useful stuff. And there is this question of how do I manage all this? How do I take care of these things? And those are great questions and discussions, probably for a future discussion, but we'll stay online with just a couple of quick intros so that we can get into the mood here. So in this slide, it's has a lot. This is just about Snyk. Snyk is an application security company. We have a lot of options for people to use them at your CLI, your IDE, your CI/CD pipeline, all these things. And you see these icons in the upper left-hand corner, which show the different things that we go after, the code you write, the open source library you use. And for today's session, we're going to look around Snyk container. And really, it's like if my team and I are assembling software, bundling it into container, and deploying it to something like a Kubernetes cluster, that's the kind of problem set that we're going to talk about. We'll, kind of give a wink that there's other stuff, but rather than clutter that discussion, just know this is what we're going after today. And we'll be happy to answer questions, as they come up about other things.
So Marco, I've got to ask here. We've featured Snyk and Sysdig individually multiple times on the channel before, and I'm sure there are folks out here viewing live or maybe after the fact that are wondering, why do we have Snyk and Sysdig on at the same time? Oh, and one other comment I just wanted to make real quick. The way I remember how to pronounce Snyk, I figure, hey, if you're sneaking around, they're gonna catch you. All right, so that's how I think about it. Anyway,
that's a sneaky way of doing it. It's not Snyk as in Snickers. It's not Snyk as in Snyk. It is Snyk. It does, by the way. We sometimes ask questions. What do you think it stands for? It stands for so now you know. So now you know Snyk is the way we say this.
I didn't want to bring that up, Marco, because I was like, oh, maybe that's the thing not to be named. But I'm glad you did.
It's like now, Voldemort.
Yeah, Voldemort. Wait, what are you doing here?
All right. And hey, Mark, before I finish asking that question, I just got to point out we have a lot of fans of your llama poster. We've got Joker TV and Hartstead that need that poster. So maybe you can also let us know a little bit about that llama poster.
All right, that's I truly, folks out there, if you have kids, I have 3. My daughter had a petting zoo visit her school, and the whole concept of this grumpy llama became a household meme. So it just took off in many different ways. We have llama statues and stuffed animals throughout the house. When my family was out one day at the store, they saw the llama truly under $10 for sale, and there's like, we gotta get it. So it's been in the office in some form or another for over a year and a half, 2 years now. I think I'm going to take it to my grave. But I'm loving it that you are all digging the llama out there. I hope
got a lot of fans here, Marco.
Say again?
All right. Where was? Okay, that's right. I was asking. Okay, so we've had Sysdig and Snyk on the channel individually multiple times.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit. Why do we have both of you on the call at the same time today? What's going on?
Thank you for the reminder. We'll actually get to that in about 2 slides, if that's okay.
Perfect.
All right. Now you know about Snyk. We're all best friends now. Eric, why don't you say this and tell me when to click?
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, there is sort of an interesting marriage here, because some of those that know us both know that there may be some overlap and things like that. And I specifically chose because in this marriage, what we're bringing to the table when we help customers solve problems is more of the threat detection and response side of what Sysdig does. And just build out until you get 1, 2, 3, 4, Marco, if you don't mind. What we like to say, cloud security fueled by runtime insights. Now, what does that mean? Well, if anyone knows us, our founder was, Mr. Co-creator of Wireshark, right? And when containers came around, it was a little bit like we can interrogate and understand what the heck is happening in and around these networks with packets and taking captures and things like that. How do we get this kind of insight with containers? And thus was born sort of this idea of being able to view at a low level what a container is doing just by watching the Linux kernel, right? And understanding anytime anything makes a syst call, right? is that something that's expected or unexpected? Being able to set up policies and rules and so on. And that brings us a wealth of information. Some of that information is what we end up passing back, which we'll get to in a second, but to Snyk to use to help with prioritization. I won't give it all away right now, but again, when you think about this solution together, we're really bringing, because there's a whole spectrum, which we'll also get into, of things you need for securing containers and cloud. And together we can fill out that spectrum pretty well. So yeah, Sysdig Secure is really ultimately the solution from us that we're talking about today.
Okay, so together we're going to tell you a story of how we, Snyk and Sysdig, have combined forces to give you even greater insight. So one of the punchlines here is that people like their tooling, whatever it is, right? Your favorite IDE, your CLI, et cetera, et cetera. And the people who use those tools, or people who use Sysdig, they're very comfortable in their own environments. And what they're looking for is, I need to do like a +1 so that I can get greater visibility. So in the final punchline here today is we're going to combine some of the knowledge that we have in runtime with Snyk to say, look, rather than focus on this large number of problems, you only have to look at a small number of vulnerabilities, because we can give you this targeted answer. But let's tell you this whole story, how we got there, which includes just this simple picture. And Eric and I meeting for the first time back in reInvent, I think it's 21. We spent about 90 minutes. Our company said, you guys should talk and kind of help figure out. And we realized that in this picture, what we show is Snyk is all about, like, we're one with the developers. Not that Sysdig is not, but we have a lot of tools that developers use at their fingertips. And what we wanted to do is figure out, how do we bring runtime logic and know-how to give you a better picture? And that's what we're going to build up today. Anything you want to say here, Eric, or I can just keep moving on? But I do want to give a thought.
Right. And there are different folks in different, we call them personas when we're on the marketing side, but the bottom line is people who do different things in the org, right? And we help different ones in different ways, and therefore bringing it together really starts to bring those folks together as well.
Okay. So I think here, so we, this is the restatement is we're going to show you some of this combination of information as we build up with some demos and examples and some hands-on as we do this. I am now going to exit out of the presentation mode and start getting into the mood for showing you some of the sample code. I've got a little bit of an outline here because there's a number of steps. I invite everybody here. I'll do a cut and paste here, if that's okay, folks, and just put it in the comments. I think I need one of you all to put a comment. So Snyk, like a lot of security-centric companies, have public repositories on GitHub with deliberately vulnerable applications that you can use. I invite you to check out or look up Snyk Space Labs GitHub and look at the different repos. If I were to type in the word, I think repos. I'm clicking too fast here. If I were to click into the word goof, we use the word goof on purpose because it signals something that's not serious. I recommend check it out. Don't run it on your production environment because you may not want to do that. It turns out that as we are preparing for these presentations, we're discovering with better and better software, better and better protections from folks like AWS, it's harder to run deliberately vulnerable applications. So I'm going to run it in my local environment. And if you are allowed by your IT team to do those things with VPNs and firewalls or antivirus, check it out. And we're going to do specifically, one of the examples is going to be something called Java Goof. It is a Java-based application. It has instructions. And I invite you again to do this. Our developer relations, DevRel folks, use this example all the time. And the instructions are really neat in here for the two candidate applications. There is a nice log4shell goof application, which you deploy to your favorite Kubernetes clusters, such as EKS, and you run exploits using the JNDI vulnerability, which is the famous log4shell. Basically, you can do anything on that system. Today, I'll do a smaller problem called to-do list. It is an application that it mimics a I want to manage my to-do list, and it's written in Java, and it has some deliberate vulnerabilities specifically centered around Docker. So if there's any questions, folks, just let me know. But I'm going to go ahead and kind of like pretend like let's read some of these things and do what we're supposed to do. Try it out at home, kids, just not on production. So it all starts out with you cloning the repository locally, and I've already done that in my site. So for this part here, I'll have the web page on the left and my terminal with larger font for your reading benefit on the right. And I'll just go back and forth and show you some of the things. So I've already cloned the code. You may have seen evidence of my Visual Studio Code in the background. I'll refer to that later, but I've got the code and I'm ready, and I want to do some things with this software. As we look at the different instructions, we're told to do a couple things, including navigate into a certain folder. I've already alluded that at the top level, you saw like 2 paths, log4shell, and to-do list. I've clicked into, or I've changed directory into, I'm sorry, I'm into the wrong one here. I'm here now. This to-do list -goof is the project that has the code. And if I were doing an ls or ls-l, you'll see, example of all the code. We are going to focus on this Docker file at some point in just a few minutes, but I'll go and say, oh, let me go ahead and run this Docker compose build to build the container locally. I've already done this. So really the time we're going to see here is not about pulling down the container. It's just going to run, and the -- build, it's a multi-stage Docker Docker compose file. So we're going to see evidence of this up and running pretty shortly. On my system, I just need to make sure I turn off my antivirus, because in a few minutes I'm going to be attacking the solution. And
now, Marco, sorry, can I ask a question there? So you mentioned multi-stage build, and a lot of times you create multi-stage builds because you don't want to include those build tools in your final image.
Correct.
You have a container that builds the image, and then another container serving your application, and that application container is typically a minimized container, ideally with fewer vulnerabilities. But as part of your demonstration, you're going to show that that is a fallacy.
So, for my purpose, no. We do have, another, like, say, half-hour, 45-minute talk that we've done. And Eric Smalling is our DevRel guy. Totally invite you guys to look at the public YouTube channels. But what Jeremy is alluding to is many people in development times, they'll pick a large, fat Docker image. And the encouragement is always go to smaller and smaller. Go to a slimmer. Go to something where you either remove packages. There are a number of best practices. We, as a deliberately vulnerable application, we don't do some of these things, because you'll see evidence later on as we were calling out, oh, you should change this version, or you're running as root, or other things. In the end, you don't want to run as root. In the end, you don't want to have a writable file system. In the end, there's a number of really good practices which will always reaffirm. And there are toolings out there. Us and other people. I was going to say everybody. I don't know if everybody, but there are plenty of options out there where the scanning, the interrogation, the analysis is just take care of some of these basic things, and you will be amazed, because one of the purpose of this example here is I have root access and write access to the file system. I'm going to take advantage of that, and so Jeremy, I appreciate that comment there.
Sure.
So I have the application up and running, and if I were to do the right thing, and let's see if I can type. I have a hard time typing and talking at the same time, but let's see if I can do it nonetheless. So I navigated per the instructions to localhost port 8080, and the application name is to-do list. It's running on Tomcat, and we're allowed to do. I'm sorry, this is the wrong. This is the I relied on autocomplete to do the wrong thing. Scratch, pretend I didn't say any of this. I have to just go to localhost 8000. The other example, which I'm not doing, is a different version. And I'm sorry, I think it is the right thing. To-do list. There we go. So I need to make sure I'm doing the right thing. So you may see me back up and do this. So the next couple of options here is, now that we have this running, why don't we go ahead and start exploiting it? So in this directory, one of the things I like about our DevRel folks is I've seen this lineage change over time, where the instructions were light and they got better and better. We're going to take advantage of their hard work and look at the exploits directory and look at the Tomcat RCE folder, which has a number of things available to us to just go ahead and run and exploit. What they've done cleverly is they built a Docker container that has, I think, an embedded Python script, which is going to attack my running container with to-do lists. It's a great example. It's a great way of just getting things moving along so that you as a person can just more quickly do the right thing. So the guidance here is let's change directly into the exploits folder. So I'll go in this thing here and to-do list and do exploits. And then the other example is go into the, source the Tomcat RCE SH file. This sets up just a couple of things. If I were to do actually, I'll just show it here because it'd probably be, I'll do a cat, Tomcat RCSH. If I show this, you'll see examples of we're just getting the host IP address. We're setting up a couple of aliases. The aliases really are, I am going to run a Docker container to take over the solution. So if I read the instructions and I source Tomcat and this, we detected the IP address, we're building it, and now we should be okay. So if I run next, check. This is, again, I'll do alias. You'll see check is right here. I'll highlight it. It's just running Tomcat and checking the local machine. So check is going to examine my running container, and the output here, and this is really good, is tells me that this host is vulnerable to this particular CVE, which is the Tomcat problem. It's really nice because it's designed for the person like me or a DevRel to very quickly at conferences and webinars just let people know that you too can see this example. Again, I encourage you to do this. You should be able to do this within 5-10 minutes and just get it running, provided you're allowed to run Tomcat containers that are vulnerable and so on in your system. So now that we're up and running, let's go ahead and start taking advantage. And one of the things I was actually intending to do is if I were to do things like a Docker container ls, I can see a bunch of containers, but I'll do a grep of goof. I see I have this one container. I'm going to go ahead and run a bash shell in this and just show you that I can do something at the command line, and ultimately I'm going to be able to do the same thing from a web page. So I just want to make sure I type in the right things. I think it's this. Oops, IT, right? Oh, what did I do wrong?
Extra T in there.
Sorry, what? Oh, I see. Thank you. Yes. There. So I have root access into the container, which is expected as a local level, and I'm going to do things like type in ls. I'm going to do a who am I, and if I want to do other things. So the ls, I see I have files. I'm root. This is good. This is what we expect. If I navigate back to the tab where I ran this this example, I'm going to go ahead and run the pwn command, which gives me access to the system itself. So it's installed. What happens is the vulnerability allows me, the Tomcat vulnerability allows me to write a file, and I now get to do the wrong thing as an attacker. And so the guidance here is let's now navigate to this web page, which I'll move over to, I'll just leave it here, to this simple text box, which has the word run. So the narrative here is, we've got an established beachhead on the container. If I was an attacker and I was able to get some kind of shell access, I would be using other tools. We use a web page to make it easy for you to see what happens. Try it at home. I do an ls. I press run or press the return key. I see a result. I'm like, hey, I'm pretty excited about this. If I did the who am I command, I see I'm running as root. If I did a ls/temp, I can see things in the temp folder. And this goes back to what Jeremy was asking for, is there are some best practices, right? I'm running as root. I can see temp. What if I did a touch/temp Marco and then did so it doesn't return anything, but if I did a ls/temp and I see Marco, what happens is I now know I have write access as root to this running container. it's not a good thing. There's an extended talk track. I've seen a lot of delightful things where we know we can do, say, D package minus L. I can see all the packages. At some point, I can start downloading stuff. I can run curl, right? If I were to run curl, I can do that, and I can start getting my bits, because the attackers out there, it's not like they hop onto a machine and say, "Oh, what do I do now?" They already know what they want to do. They have their tool of scripts, their libraries, their packages, whatever they have that ready now. And they're just waiting for something out there to do this. So this is really cute. But Mr. Attacker, Mrs. Attacker is already downloading and figuring out what else can do. They're probably looking at other IP addresses. And so we got this problem, and we need to now figure out what to do around this. So the instructions, or the ingredients, as I would say, you can see the examples here. Run who am I, run D package, is let's exit out of the package and start trying to mitigate what's happening here. So I'll do a Control C for the running container waited for run, and the guidance we have is let's run this complicated command, which I've typed over here instead, because there's a typo in the instructions, which I haven't changed the code. Is if you look at the example, you see this text here, Java-goof _ Java goof. The idea was this is the name of the container on your system, and that is not correct. If I did a Docker container ls to see the name, oops, let me do the better thing and grep out goof. So Java. Oh, it's a Docker image ls. You'll see evidence that the name of it is Java goof, and it has a tag. The font, because I made it big for your benefit, is not showing up well, but the tag is original. So the naming here is wrong. The better command is going to be what I have here is Snyk, which is our command. Container is our sub command, container. So we're going to do a test of containers. The name of the container happens to be Java goof, which you see there with the version of orig. The file name Docker is in this folder, and I wanted to look for application vulnerabilities. I'll press, or as folks in other places say, I'll mash the return key, and we'll wait a couple of seconds. And what's going to happen is you're going to get a lot of results. So while it takes about, say, 30 seconds for this to come up, this is the part where I tell you is, if you're a command line person, you enjoy this. You may the results out in JSON, maybe do some JQ. You may absorb this into your favorite CI/CD solution. We've got all these integrations. You expect like everyone to have integrations, but the people who are clever see, oh, it's a command line tool. I can run this on any CI/CD system in the universe. And the answer is true. Yes, you can. Just get the binaries on there. You've probably saw a lot of text go by really quickly. So I'm going to go ahead and make this into a snyk.txt. I think I already have the file on my system, but I'm just doing this so that we can review it in the IDE. I've described CLI operations. I've described how you may do it in CI/CD systems. We do have integrations into your favorite, the most popular IDEs out there, so you can see it in a nicer, more attractive, color-coded view. But for here, we're going to keep it real. And this is a shout out to the AWS folks. Is when we do things like AWS workshops, and we use Cloud9, which is a great resource. We tend to do a lot of command line things because we know that's highly portable for the population out there. So if you ever have a chance, you want to try something in Cloud9, giving a shout out to my friends out there in AWS land, give it out. Any comment there, Sai? I'll just keep moving on here. Otherwise,
go ahead, Jeremy.
Oh yeah, sorry. So there was a comment left by Hartstead, which I thought was interesting. He says, are most malicious attacks done by looking for vulnerabilities, brute forcing, or social engineering? And my opinion is that a lot of attackers are lazy, and they don't have to work that hard to exploit a vulnerability. They only need to be right once, whereas you as a defender have to be right all the time. It's not really fair. Attackers definitely have an advantage, but I would say that they use like a combination of all of those to try to infiltrate systems. I don't know if you feel differently. or if you have a different perspective.
You know, the sky's the limit on public assets. And I've told my kids, you know, this is somebody's job to, you know, commandeer, steal resources, run a VM, whatever you want to call it, where they're just constantly attacking machines for vulnerabilities. And the alert they get is going to be an email, Twitter. I don't know what. They get some alert. They're not watching. They're just running this right over 10,000 machines, and boom, number 155 has a vulnerability. So that's the brute force attack. The social engineering, those are great questions. That's other things. But I am fascinated at how these attackers are doing it at scale. They've got their scripts to just do these ping tests. I tell stories, and you know, guys rein me in, but I've opened up my computer to the internet. Within 7 to 12 minutes, I had 3 attacks from overseas countries looking for logins, and they didn't work. For, you know, admin password, you know, all these things were they're just trying their attacks within 7 to 12 minutes. That was about 5 years ago. I expect that number is probably 3-4 minutes at this point of people just, you know, being that prolific. It is amazing to me for that to happen.
It's crazy how much of these things are automated.
Yes.
I believe there was some webcam protocol out there that was hacked a while ago, and apparently a lot of folks just happened to have their webcams running, and they had no idea. Someone happened to put up a website where they just collated all of them into one page. You could just go through and start scanning through people's webcams. Point being, a lot of these vulnerabilities have gotten to a point where it's not just one person sitting there digging through, it's automated. And if a CVE like this goes out and you don't address it, chances are someone out there is already building a script to find every website. Let's take that Tomcat example. Every website that might be vulnerable to that hack. And it doesn't hurt them to run that hack against, you know, all of the different websites that they think might be running on Tomcat. It's automated, and so I think that's why we had another question actually about DevSecOps, about how important it is for developers and operations engineers to actually include some of these tools in that process across the life cycle right from the very beginning. And I think that's about to be what you're about to show us, right, Marco?
Yeah, I'll show you those things, because there's a thing, and I appreciate it. So let's go back to the screen share, and I'll show some things. So I had already shown the color coded output, and there's a great, you know, talk track. But let's maybe know that the command line output here is meant to tell you, hey, we've examined a number of projects, we found some vulnerabilities. What does this mean? You know, all these things you see, criticals and highs and CVEs. I'll give you a little bit of insight, because it's just good to know. So the instructions in the web page tell you to let's look for this text here, and I'll go ahead and do it in the editor, because I remember I sent this stuff to a text file for it to be easier for us to look in. So there it is, and I'll make this big. And if I need to rearrange my screen, I'll just maybe make the font just a little bit smaller so that we can see a little bit more. So hopefully, don't memorize the words, because it's not important. But really what's happening is, you can imagine the output's formatted for your usage, and it is available in JSON things. Here what we're telling people is, you know, you need to upgrade your base image, was at 8521, to something else in order to fix it. And this is really good information for people to say, like, oh, you know, I like this, because when you get comfortable and the tooling has access to the databases, and they know this version here that I'm highlighting right now, when they know this version is out of date, but you're encouraged to this, it becomes an easier button. You don't have to be as much of a security expert. You can just start making some of these things kind of like programmatically. I can show you like a glimpse later on how it's even easier. But for now, know that the instructions which we had, which include, let me go to the right webpage, is to do this. And let's look at the recommendations is the next thing. So the recommendations here, if I look for the word, let's see if I can navigate it. I mean, see, I don't know if you saw it, it's over 7,000 lines. You know, it would take us a while for us to do all those things. So this section here, and I think I can make the font a little bit bigger for ease of reading, is we're going to give information to the folks on the other side to know, here are your various options. And so this is the part where, you know, if you're running on 8521, with 735 vulnerabilities. That's a large number. If you were to upgrade to, say, a smaller, just a little bit more, 21 to 84, you now have 41. Most people see that as tremendous upside. It keeps me in the same Tomcat family. I probably don't have to do any real work. If I instead wanted to go to like a Tomcat 10, which may require refactoring, or other version, and this is where Jeremy asked about maybe some of the lighter ones. I mean, there's some really neat stuff out there that gives you the ability to, say, reduce it from 735 to 2 by just changing one thing. And that one thing, if I'm clicking on the right one, is going, it's not this one, I'm sorry, I'm clicking, it's I'm going to look at the to-do list, and I'm looking for my Docker file here. This is the line I'm going to change in my thing. I was confused by this line here. I forgot multi-stage build. I am going to change this line here because remember, the text says change from 21 to something newer. Let's follow the ingredients, as we would say, and make the change to actually 64. There's a reason for that. I think it's because it was written at a certain time. I know this works. We can probably go to 64, 84, but for fun, let's keep it at 64 because that's what the instructions say, and it was written at a time before this particular version came out. So I will yes?
Mark, I just wanted to say, I do find it interesting that it gives you multiple paths for upgrade. If you want to do a minor patch, meaning, look, you have to get something out the door and you need to know that it'll continue to work without failing. But if you're ready to do a major upgrade, you can go from Tomcat 8 all the way to Tomcat 10. Granted, might need some changes to your application stack or whatever to make sure that things continue to work. But I do like that it gives you those options because as a security engineer, sometimes you can't just go to Tomcat 10. You need to go to the latest version that still supports your apps.
So I like that you say it because that is absolutely true. We've seen, I want to make sure I'm in the right window. And so what I'm doing here, I'll just do the build as I talk. I've seen that problem statement many times. I can't jump versions, right? And we know very few people are right now starting a brand new application, right? They're in the middle of an active development, right? It's a brownfield, it's not greenfield. So they need to be told, here's your best option for your code and your deployments and your releases that are already in flight. That helps them out a lot. And Eric is actually going to help tie this up in a little bit. And Eric, you're like this guy waiting, where the answer he's going to provide is also like, look, sometimes he's got to ship it and you just got to know what to do right away. And that's going to be the punchline. So now I'm running this this container, and the exploit here is if I were to do the check, what's going to happen, what I expect. Oh, I know what's I think I know what happened. So on my computer, I don't have a lot of freedom over my AV and the antivirus, and it times out, right? And my other computer, I don't even have a chance to override my AV. So if you try this on your own computer and you have all those permissions, you're really lucky. But there is a chance. Oops, I am running. I'm sorry. I did. Why is this doing this thing here? To check. I typed in. I was already in the container, I think.
It's probably comforting, right, Marco, to at least know that your antivirus is working as expected when you're doing these kinds of things.
It is. I was telling people like 3 years ago, we could do anything we wanted to. Now to do some of these vulnerabilities like Log4j and other things, it's getting pretty hard. And my IT, when I deploy to our EKS, it's not even a day now. They'll tell me you're running vulnerable containers. And it's not a slapdown, but it is a slapdown that we're not allowed to do it. It's just a matter of time before we're blocked with Amazon Inspector or something being used for that kind of stuff. But what I did is I ran the check alias, which has running the container, and you'll see down here that I am no longer vulnerable to the CVE. And if I were to do any of the other examples, I just won't have a chance to do that anymore. I do want to transition here because I want to just give you like a little bit more of a glimpse of some other things. And the screens I want to show you now, it's kind of like a buttoning it up to let you see yet other ways how this is manifested. So in this example here, I've already navigated to the Snyk UI that has the same information. So think of this as like, I was developer, kept it real, did IDE, did CLI. I'm doing all that stuff here. But if I work on a greater team and I don't have the code on my hand, maybe I want to see some of the same results. So same information, it's just presented in a nicer way. The same things that we had and we talked about is I had version 8.521 and I'm given my alternate paths. I really do think that 64 version is because the docs were written at that time. One of the things I do want to signal is some of the niceties you'll see, and this is, by the way, all this stuff is available on Snyk.io. It's a free sign up. You can use your account right now. Your only limit really is number of times you get to do this in 1 month. So I encourage you, check out a vulnerable application, check out Snyk and other things and try it out. And you can also do something like where if you were to do an open fix PR, which I'll start the process if I click this button, but I'm not going to complete it. What it does is you already saw me do like a one-line change. And the challenge we give to people is, can anyone here raise your hand and say, I've never made a typo on a one-line change? And the answer is there's I don't think there's a single person on the planet that can say that. This nice thing here, it'll create the PR with all the context, do the one-line change. You click it and it's done. If you have PR checks, if you have GitHub Actions or whatever your favorite Git repo is, those will all take hold. And that's a lot of comfort for the people that do that operation. But the information here is really, really useful. It turns out at this point, I still have a large number of vulnerabilities. And Eric, I can continue on this, or if you want to start showing yours, but I can continue as I can show a little bit of the secret sauce that shows Sysdig. What do you want me to do here?
Yeah, I think you should get to that secret sauce.
Okay, yeah.
And while you do that, I do think, like, back to the point Sy was making in the whole DevSecOps world, we have information that can help us. Like if there's a fix available, if it's exploitable, those kind of things, like we should be incorporating that and doing the right thing, right? I can see if there's no fix, if there's no exploit.
Yeah.
We have to start making, we can either let it go or make other choices. And that's just where I think we add to that. And that's where you can point here, Marco, to say, let's add even another filter to
So here's the thing.
Real in-use risk. Right.
All right. So Eric and I have done demonstrations at least a dozen times, right? Webinars, stuff, like we're like brothers. And again, it all started in reInvent 2021. Shout out to the folks. So what I have here is just like this big view. You see all these different icons and Kubernetes. But what I have specifically, I'm sorry, did I click on the wrong one? Oh, so this is right. I was navigated down. I clicked into you can see the Kubernetes Helm over on the upper left-hand corner here. So this is a Kubernetes deployment. It has Snyk available. It has Sysdig plumbed in, and it has a little bit more information. Snyk has this nice thing where, for Kubernetes people, like, remember, Jeremy, you asked the question, like, what about some of these best practices? We have some coverage for some of those best practices, like limits and running as root, and those are things we like to show as, this is something you don't want to do. As a user, I still see 117 issues. I don't like this, and I think what happened is when I'll refresh this page, the filtering, maybe when I minimize went away. One of the things we like to tell people is like, what would you do if I could click on a button that says executed, and it down filters that 117 to only 28, and we're using Sysdig information, powered by Sysdig, to tell us, like, hey, if your entire universe, I recommend you look at these 28 because these are the things that we're actually seeing in the production environment. And that's almost like the easy question because everybody says, yes, I want to see that. Combined with what you see on screen is a sense of priority. So Jeremy, I think you asked the question of, or someone asked questions about social engineering and other things. One of the things that we show when we highlight this priority score is we do this arithmetic, this formula, where we know that people want the easy button of saying, please tell me what I should focus on first. Of course, I can say click on critical to reduce that to 5. But if I told you that the critical seen in production, and these are some of the reasons are why we are concerned about this, this means something. Depending on the code base, this now goes back to an earlier question about open source, is we have smarts. if an issue is trending on social media, we know that becomes an attack vector that is really popular right now. And so that tends to bump up the priority score. If we see a vulnerability that has a known fix, we increase that priority score because, like, hey, if you have something that can be fixed, you should probably just fix it, right? And other things get into play there. So these are all the things that Snyk and other places are trying really hard to just point you in the right direction. So you don't have to think so much. There's all these links. There's all this detail that you can go to these public websites and NVDs and CVSS and all these wonderful terms. But you have the right to look at all the details behind the vulnerability databases to get in the know. Once you're comfortable with it, because you've clicked and you've read and you analyze, you'll just say, hey, I like this. I'm just going to say, yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and fix this. And you're done. And that's what I would recommend everybody, wear your boots, wear your pants, wear your jacket, wear your hat, and all those things. Stay warm and stay protected. Eric?
Well, let me explain just a little bit more. Earlier, I think we were headed down the path of talking about bloat, right? Containers sometimes contain crap that just doesn't matter, right? So this executed thing that you clicked on and had a significant reduction, where's that coming from? Well, it's that vantage point that Sysdig has to see what's started in the environment. Container has all these packages. Which ones are actually loaded in memory or being used? If it's in use and it's vulnerable, there you go, right? That's something that you need to be worried about. If it's never even invoked or never running, I think about like an Nginx container that might have all these different capabilities and functions. You may be using one piece of that, right? If it's vulnerable and it's running, you should probably prioritize it and fix it. And that's where this information comes from, the fact that we sit in runtime with Sysdig and sort of scan that environment. Marco, as you were talking about, SHing in and writing files and doing the touch command and the ls and all that stuff. If you're doing that in the environment where you're running this runtime security and have what we like to call our security camera, and you have policies set up or rules that are don't allow that, right? We're going to trigger that and see that. And so I think that's the other half of, in addition to passing good information back, we're able to actually alert people on that behavior at runtime.
So it seems like you're combining the runtime threat intelligence with the static analysis of the container image to identify the images that need to be prioritized or fixed first. Nice.
It's a bit like a waterfall, right? You've got a lot of things you can apply, and if you can also apply a runtime, in use, then you're really helping your developers get out from under the mountain.
And I can't speak to how great it is that you do the prioritization, because I was just doing a quick Google search. There were over 25,000 CVEs last year. And the year before that, it was something like 20,000. And that number keeps going up. That's on average over 50 CVEs a day. And if the security engineering team went to the dev team with every single CVE every single time, everything will come to a screeching halt, right? Nothing would ever get done. And so I think that's absolutely critical that this kind of prioritization is being done. Not only does the CVE exist in the tech stack, but is it being executed? I think that is something I haven't seen. That's pretty interesting. Folks, we are almost out of time. I wanted to give you a chance here for kind of some closing statements. We had some discussion in the chat here. I thought it was interesting talking about how whether AI could be used to start opening up more and more security vulnerabilities. And Jeremy has had a good point. It really does go both ways. And I was just curious, when you're looking at the future for Sysdig and Snyk, whether it's AI or not, I'd love for you to share a little bit about what gets you excited, what's coming out soon, and maybe tell us a little bit more about what's next for Snyk and Sysdig.
Yeah, on the threat detection side, we think there's a balance between a few things. One, AI, or that's being driven machine learning and things like that. Like, you can get some good insights and automatically have that happen, right? There's also things that, like, in the community, we talked about Falco being a community project. There are folks that are in the real world or encountering things. They're writing. They're saying, here's the kind of thing that we need to be looking for. Here's the detection. Right. And then there's just threat research, right? And I think many organizations have these teams that are out looking for what's going on right now. Where are we seeing issues? And between the three of those things, kind of an AI approach, a human approach, a community approach, and threat research, I think you get to a good spot. But we think AI has a big role going forward. We try not to use that term to wash everything that we do, because we think there's good things that are more human driven as well.
Absolutely. And Marco, I want to get your take on it as well. And we also have a question in the chat whether Snyk is similar to Qualys.
Yeah. So what I'm looking forward to is seeing Eric at RSA industry conference, right? And that's in a couple of weeks. We have teams that work on these problems. I do see anything that makes it easier for people to run vulnerabilities. We used to call them script kiddies back in the day, but there are scripts out there, right? Anything that helps people attack is a threat. And as you heard, like, it's harder for me to run deliberately vulnerable applications on my system. So I think that's a positive. We just have to keep watching and always be, vigilant and watch out what's happening. I'd like to see what happens. What does this talk look like in 2 years? I'm really interested in knowing what that looks like.
Absolutely.
Qualys, the question with Qualys. Hey, I'm not qualified to talk about Qualys. There's a lot of options out there for people. So that I'm kind of towing like a company line. I know every company has smart people that are working the problem like every day. So today, what we have is going to be different from what we have tomorrow and next week. Same thing for Qualys. I would encourage you to always, just try out what you want and ask the right questions. These kinds of events are probably hosted by a number of folks. Give it a shot and try to figure out what it is. Last piece is, there's a lot of opportunity for you to protect your software in many different ways. And the more you look at it is better. I am being a bit evasive because I really don't know about Qualys that much.
In the last couple of minutes that we have, I was just wondering if you could tell folks the best way to get started if they're interested in exploring the solution that you described to us today.
Yeah. So I think with any solution, including Snyk, go to the website and check out some of the public resources. It turns out that companies like Snyk have free tiers. It requires an email and login, and you get to assign if you're a software developer, you can always fork a public repo and submit your results there. It's up to you. If people say, I don't want to put my company repo, that's fine. Use a public repo and get acquainted. The next part is, in any solution, is see how comfortable you are with using that environment, right? If the information just doesn't make any sense, it doesn't plug into your tools, or I don't understand what I'm reading. Maybe it's not the right tooling for you, but see how familiar it is, because ultimately what I would encourage is make your workflow and do like a +1, add an extra thing, rather than you change the entire way you work, your entire CI/CD pipeline, just to bend for one tool. Those days are probably gone. We're here to figure out how to work one workflow together, and that's why Sysdig and in this case Snyk work together, because we realize we can't ask people to bend. We have to bend so it's easy for them to see this information.
Yeah, I mean, they want their tools to be able to work together. Bottom
Yeah.
line. Yeah, and that's with AWS as well.
Yeah.
And Jeremy, you asked the question. Say you go to any page on sysdig.com, and believe me, there's a free trial button on there. So that's the answer for us.
Yeah.
Great. Oh, Sai, you're on mute.
Oh, I'm on mute. So we're out of time here, but I do want to thank you all for joining me, all of our viewers out there. Please reach out to Eric and Marco directly. Eric has tagged his Twitter there. You can probably find them on LinkedIn as well. We want to thank you guys for joining us. Thanks for the awesome demo, Marco, and for all our viewers out there. Be sure to subscribe to Containers from the Couch on YouTube, and be sure to catch us for our next episode. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having us.